we've expensive equipment on the combines, really very conscious of vermin, that they're all in the one tidy, clean shed with a concrete floor, concrete walls, but you still will get mice and rats in there. So open all the elevators, drums, stone traps, take everything, as much stuff as you can off to leave it. We even take out the grain pans, and people wouldn't go to that, but it definitely makes that there's no resting area for mice. And then we've putting in a rodent shield around it, which is, it's just an electric fence system around it.
As the weather closes in, land work has come to a halt for many. Hopefully we'll get a spell of dry weather soon to finish harvesting root crops and vegetables, and maybe even getting some last minute planting done. It's always worthwhile to take stock at this stage to look back at what's been achieved so far and to identify where improvements can be made. Have you walked your ground recently? You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Teagasc Oak Park is the most visited tillage farm in Ireland, hosting numerous open days and discussion groups throughout the year. I'm delighted today to be joined by Brendan Bourke, the Oak Park farm manager who oversees this large operation, and ensuring all trials are managed and harvested successfully each year without a hitch. Brendan, it's been a little while since we talked. This year has been very good in terms of planting winter cereals. How did you find the season so far?
Yeah, it was actually, in fairness. But you wouldn't want to be waiting for the perfect week, because you would now be in the wrong week. But we did, start sowing really in the first week of October, and we were done nicely by the 25th of October, so which is ideal, I think, anyway. And so everything is nicely up and established now. But we do have one or two trials that we waiting on seed, and you can just see the mess that one we sowed this day week, last 31st or whatever it was, 31st, and it was quite mucky. Only after maybe an inch of rain, but you can see the difference in handling stuff in bad conditions. But it's still quite warm, so I'd say it'll be okay with crows and everything descended on it, which would bring you back to not a good time to be sowing.
And you have plenty of crows around here with all the forests and everything.
Yes, yeah. It seems to take its toll on that, but they've all emerged nicely. Haven't done exact plant counts, but we're not missing any anyway. It's not patchy or anything like that, so it is good enough that way.
Oak Park has a variety of very light land and some, you wouldn't call it really heavy land, but it's heavier land for sure.
Yeah.
Do you treat those any differently in terms of a plough versus a min-till, or even with the plough-based system? Do you, like with a non-powered cultivator sower, get you away in most cases, or do you need to turn back to kind of the powered sower kind of scenario?
Yeah, it is, and we would have ideal soil here for non-powered cultivator drills or working them. You would work quite efficiently in them, but most of our fields have trial plots within them, so that kind of goes to conventional in most cases. Although we have separate cultivation experiments looking at the three systems: direct drill, min-till we call it, and conventional, the plough and power harrow and seed drill. So, but we the stuff that's in around Oak Park here is very easy to manage. It has its downfalls, obviously. If you come next May and it has started to get a drought, it just stops growing then. But out in Knockbeg and the, we'll call it the northern half of the farm here, it's not a big farm to start calling north and south, but the soil's a little bit tackier, and you would have to just watch those, particularly with compaction of that. So they definitely plough them on the right day and probably get around to them earlier rather than in the later part of the season. So, but we don't purposely sow min-till on any of the commercial blocks here, because I said there is trials within the fields. But we do have our new trial started this year, where we've 30 hectares out in Knockbeg, which is a little bit heavier soil, and that's been divided up into blocks, and we split each. There's 5 blocks within the 30 hectares, and we're dividing that into min-till and conventional. Each field is divided in 2, and it's the same crop in each block, but we've the rotation of the wheat, barley, oats and beans. So this is the first year it has been in min-till for the last 10 years, so we've designated that whole block now to do that and work in other trials if needed on fertilizers or on any nutrients or any plant pathology either. But the basis of it is that it's a cultivation experiment looking at both options on the same field.
On a very large kind of block basis.
Yes, yeah. They're all 4 or 5 hectare blocks. It's not huge, but it's enough that you have a reasonable spread across. Even within the fields, there's little bits of soil difference and little bits of wet spots, dry spots. So we hopefully will be able to work through that. That we're not selecting for nice places in the field. And we'll hopefully bring that. Now we have the yield mapping on the combine, so we'll be able to see that as the end result. But we'll obviously monitor it, as Jack Jameson will be looking at that. He's a new researcher, so he will be looking at a lot of that and see what we can take from it and build on the whole program. But it is definitely interesting, and it's all nicely emerged now. But we're trying to use it as what the farmer would use as a min till, what his options are, and then the plough, what the options are there as well. So.
And is that experiment being done in the sense of it's been sown, if you like, in what farmers would consider the right time?
The right time, yeah. And this year was particular. Like, we were literally, I didn't want to go in September, even though I'd say a min till. Some guys might have went in September, but we said we'll try and be as friendly to the IPM as possible. So we waited till the 1st of October, but we did start doing all our min till stuff on October. The wheat, oats and barley were all done within a week. And then we waited till the 2nd week of October, which will be, in theory, plenty of time with the plough. And we got around it then. So that's only a small change in it, but rather than trying to do them all to one day, but doing as somebody with the min till may have larger acreage and needs to get through it anyway. So you kind of have to allow for that as well. So that's some of the
establishment rates, Brendan, have been pretty good all round. Are you noticing something similar here in Oak Park? And
yeah, pretty good, but pretty good. Yeah, I didn't do exact counts, but we aimed for the 250 to 300 seeds, sowing 300 seeds. So we would have that, I'd say, pretty well. The only one crop after chopped straw, chopped oat and straw, quite a lot of trash in it. We cultivated after harvest, after chopping, cultivated, and that's a little bit behind. I'd say there's a little bit too much trash. I'd say that the seed is sitting in, just walking through it and looking at it, rooting around. The seeds are still there, but they're in a kind of a spongy mush, which I don't think they're going to come through.
Okay.
So that's maybe we should have worked the chopped straw again a second time to break it down a bit further, or worked it a little bit deeper.
That's a min till scenario you're talking about,
isn't it? Min till scenario, yeah. So that's it'll come out later in the year. I'm sure maybe it'll catch up, but it looks a little bit patchy.
Okay, a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other one, I suppose, in terms of the overall rotation, I know in Oak Park here we've run into a few problems around club root. How has that changed the strategy here in terms of oilseed rape?
Yeah, we have taken oilseed rape out of the rotation for the last 2 years because of that club root, and it's very hard. I don't think it's in all the farm, but it definitely appeared on 2 or 3 blocks, and you don't really want to move it around. So we were on about a 5-year rotation with oilseed rape. So we have 7 years now, but we've come back in this year in one of the suspect fields with, no, it's not the full field now, it's a block, because we didn't want to really take a whole field out for it, with club root tolerant varieties, or is not the right word, tolerant or resistant, but I would call it tolerant for the moment anyway, and put those into that field, knowing that we have a bit of club root, but just to see how effective these varieties are. Now in the same field, it's all established nicely, and we won't see anything yet, I'd say, but there is a lot of Sherlock in it as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the Sherlock got club root alongside it, because we sowed it in blocks or plots, which are 5 meters wide, and there's a half-meter gap between them. But in the gap, there's Sherlock in them. So it'd be interesting to see are we getting club root in the Sherlock, which herbicides won't.
These will be taken to yield in comparison to
yeah.
non-resistant ones, or
there is non-resistant. There is non-resistant ones in as well. So there's 14 altogether. I think 14 varieties. So there's 10 of those which have tolerance to club root. Anyway.
Well, that'll be very interesting, because club root is becoming, I think, more of a problem out there than people realize, and it's probably taking a little bit of yield. So it'll be interesting to see how those go. Because I suppose the expectation, Brendan, would be those club root tolerant varieties would be lower yielding than the conventional.
Yes, that is, and the seed companies that have given us said that no, they are going to be less, but just it doesn't get you over that hump of not worrying about club root.
Yeah.
But it's not a definite place in the field. It is a bit patchy in the field of club root, which that's the nature of disease, but you don't want to be pulling it all across the field either with your equipment and that. So
Just talking about, I suppose, different crops within the rotation. This year was a fantastic year for putting in cover crops because the harvest was
yes,
not probably 10 days earlier. And I suppose Oak Park, I presume Oak Park, the same as most other farmers, apply to the EIP, and we're putting in cover crops for that. In terms of the total, there's perhaps a lot of farmers out there thinking today, God, there's an awful lot of growth in these fields. What am I going to do with it? I suppose the first question just to ask you, and have you planted in winter crops in a reasonably big crop of cover crop, and what did you do with that? And if you know what I mean, to resow now with a winter crop at the moment.
no, we did. We took the easy option. Well, it's not the easy option, but it suited our rotation here that we went after the winter barley with what's going into spring barley next year. But it's on that block of the farm which is quite light and it's not really in the full wheat oats rotation, that it's a little bit light, I think, for it. So it's spring barley, winter barley, and was in oilseed rape as well. So that has got a cover crop mix, and it looks a super crop this year. Huge bulk of material there. But again, as you say, it was sowed in an ideal time. It was sowed the 28th of July, which sometimes you wouldn't actually be finished your winter barley. With straw was gone and everything, so we got the good opportunity then, and I ticked all the boxes, and that this little bit of moisture in the soil, we got to churn it over a little bit and sow it the same day with the same machine, and then rolled it in, and I think it was up within 3 or 4 days almost it had chitted, and so it never stopped really. So you full bulk of biomass there now, but we've had a good crop last year and the year before as well. But what we did plough them down in the springtime, quite early in the spring, because these fields will be quite early for malting barley and that. And it actually, as a standing crop now, you would really want your plough nicely, properly set up with skimmers, discs all working correctly on it. You don't want any other grasses or anything in to be dragging with you, but it ploughed down quite easily. But what we have done though in the last 2 years is actually wait for that big frosty night in January, February, and go out with the roller and break it down, and it seemed to work quite well.
And with that, then, when you were rolling it with the roller on that frosty night, you're
Yeah,
still coming back in and ploughing that. Is there any roundup involved there or anything like that?
no, there wasn't last year. No, no,
And
no.
did the ploughing make any difference, Brendan, in terms of utilizing or when you're rolling it, I should say, so the crop is laying one way or it's laying the other way in terms
Yeah.
of going back with the plough, any
No,
worse
it
than
didn't seem to. No,
dragging?
now it
No.
was we rolled it because I just looked back on my when you uh, when did we roll it? It was mid-January, so we weren't actually ploughing it, for a couple of weeks after that. It was towards the end of February. Um, but this sort of ground you could plough it any day you wanted to really, but we didn't need to plough it that early. But no,
Yeah.
there's no problem ploughing it down. And
And the day you chose, that was because people talk about ploughing in the frost, but I presume it's a relatively big frost, as in it's a minus.
oh yeah, it was a -2 or 3. Now you probably need a little more, but we were all done by 11 o'clock in the morning. 10, 11 o'clock in the morning before the frost had thawed really. So
Yeah, yeah.
there
So
wasn't many of those last winter, but you'd have to be watching for them at the same time. Because
okay.
I don't think it makes much effect. You just really, if you're going in on a soft material that's not frozen, yeah, I'd say you just be doing a bit of muck and it'll stick to everything anyway.
So with the crops this year, and the cover crops this year, in that field which is destined for spring cereal, are they
Yeah.
bigger than you've ever
Oh, they
seen?
are. They're quite substantial there. There's you wouldn't quite walk through it now. It's that dense of material. You would.
Would you think that you're going to try and do the same thing? Have a go at
That's the
rolling
plan.
them
I do the
out?
same again. Roll it down. Yeah, that's the
And
plan
did
anyway.
you, or were you tempted to put some Roundup or weed control on the ins and outs of that? Around the headlands and that, in terms of where the plough was, wouldn't be able to turn it over very well, or did you bother?
No, no, we didn't in last year anyway, so we didn't need to. Now we'd be watching. We've kind of tried to cut back as best we can on Roundup, just kind of blanket cover in places where, but it does show up in other weeds and stuff that I know Roundup wouldn't particularly affect them. But you're just keeping a better eye on not doing an overall cover of Roundup because it's there and we can use it. But if there's no grass weeds there or nothing that's going to be difficult, we didn't spray it.
Speaking of which, actually, with weeds, were there a few weeds that you were, just before harvest, around harvest, you were kind of looking through and went, well,
Yeah,
maybe we should look at them a bit harder next year.
yeah, we had our open day last June, and it was a bit of a yeah, what happened here? But it's not. It's partially weather and chemistry, but we did get to spray them in the autumn with Ferbermet, which worked pretty well. But then when it dried out in end of April, May, it dried out. You had these cracks appearing in the ground, and when we know there was thistles and poppies and stuff. We would have also a little bit of poppy, but not as much. We have quite a few thistles that reappeared. But when you went look at them, they seemed to start to down in a crack in the ground where they got no the seed had re-exposed itself in the crack and nicely come up then and found daylight obviously very quickly. So the rooting was probably maybe an inch or two down below the level of the ground where they're down in a crack. You could walk along the field anywhere and you'd see where they were coming up in it. So they had got a spring herbicide as well, but it didn't do a lot for them, I'd say. So
Probably a
just
timing issue, as you were saying, Brendan.
yeah, yeah,
They probably emerged very late and way past where you
yeah.
put the spring
And you
herbicide
think
on.
you were thinking you had the gate almost closed as regards herbicides. We'll just keep going on, but then they just jumped up. Then
Yeah.
not all across the farm, but in certain fields which would have, and particularly if there was patchy crops in it the year before, or maybe a lot of trash and ground on the ground, it mightn't have helped it either.
So have you changed your strategy at all this year in terms of the weed
No, well,
control herbicides?
no, we haven't got out, which that's a little bit disappointed. We haven't got out herbicides, but it's a kind of because we get quite busy sowing here, and it's very difficult to take somebody off a drill and go spraying for a nice fine day. So we're hoping to get a day this week next. Well, I don't think today is a reasonable day, but it's not dry enough either. So
No.
to get to spray a herbicide. So we'll do the same again, but maybe watch a little bit earlier in the springtime and see what actually has come through. That they're and. But then you have maybe a better cover, a better crop there that the crop itself might compete a little better as well.
Okay, I suppose when you have full crops, it does make it a
Yeah,
little bit easier
yeah,
as
yeah,
well. One of the last things I want to talk to you about is because you mentioned sowing, you're busy sowing out there, and in terms of your developments, and in fairness, I think in fairness to the farm, it keeps developing every year and trying to get better and
mm,
that kind of thing. Most
mm,
tractors here have auto steer on them. Are they
yeah,
linked to GPS or to
yeah.
not GPS to RTK, I should say, rather than
They
GPS?
are now. It's we have them for the last 10 years with RTK, basically for sowing our plots and have our gaps in our plots in their proper places and all that. So they are all in RTK. Now it is the expensive end of it. It's coming a lot cheaper now with simpler systems, and I think most tractor manufacturers are having a good option on any tractor really over 100 horsepower that it'll be steer ready, where maybe 10 years ago they weren't. You were having to buy a high end or a high horsepower tractor to have a steer ready for RTK, well, for steer and guidance, that you weren't using your freehand. But it does make a huge difference. And it's almost to the point of where tractor drivers won't go rolling or go doing anything without having RTK, because
You turned on.
yeah, well, we were very much in the viewing gallery here as well, and they do not want to see gaps or misses or overlaps. So
Sure.
but for driver comfort, but actually just everything's in the right place, and we're not exactly on controlled traffic here, but our plots are pretty much in the same place as they were every year, so that makes a huge difference in it.
You're pretty expert on that, Brendan, because you have been
Well,
kind of well, you think you're pretty good, better
yeah,
than most
yeah,
in fairness. You've been in the middle of this for probably for 10 years.
yeah,
For farmers, I mean, RTK is still expensive enough in the sense of
yeah,
you
yeah.
probably have to get software or turn on software, and it's going to cost.
And that's the thing. You don't want to jump into it and thinking I have a screen and I have RTK enabled on it, but then your machines. Well, for driving and steering, that's fine. But if you want auto shut on and off on a drill or a spreader or a sprayer, unlock codes and all that can add more money to it, and it's a bit of a shame really, because it's all doable and it's just literally codes. But I'm sure the companies have spent money having those auto shut on and off at the right spacing. So RTK allows that, but just you'd have to be mindful of that buying machine. And when you ask the first day, is it RTK, is it section control unlocked? They will probably tell you then. But if you don't ask the first day and you go back looking for it afterwards, that's when it starts getting added in as an expense, which is a bit disappointing. But as regards other system, would the standard free to air, we'll call it, or EGNOS work? It probably would for sowing, but you'd have to be careful enough that you do get drift over the day. So if you start a field left to right or right to left, it doesn't matter, doing in strips, and you're working across the field, you take a break at lunchtime, hopefully. you come back out, you probably reset your lines again and work across the field. It wouldn't allow you to do skip runs, which is very good on headland management and tracking and all that. Skip every second or third run and just keep moving across the field, or sewing your tram lines first, which some people do. If you weren't on RTK, doing that sort of thing mightn't be the best plan, because you could get a half-meter drift of over 4 or 5 hours, which is a bit too much. If you start on the left side of the field and keep working across, you won't notice that. Most people still have their scribers on their drill anyway, and they'll see if they're moving. But if you want to go without scribers and that, doing a bit blindly, that'll be a bit tricky. So without the RTK, I think.
Yeah, so there's lots of decisions to be made, but as you say, it probably is getting a bit cheaper, and there's probably better systems out there, and probably slightly simpler systems out there at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of them are going with motor steerings now. If you have an older tractor that's not maybe hydraulic steer, or is fitting into the hydraulic steering units on it, that you can put motor steerings on them, which kind of are every bit as accurate as a hydraulic drive steering, which most tractors have anyway. But the motor steering seems to work quite well on them.
A couple of other questions. One around, did you get any new pieces of equipment here in Oak Park this year? And was there what was the reason for buying it in the first place, other than replacement? Was there any surprises in it?
We're tightened on budget, but we kind of have to manage. We manage as best we can, but we still have a good budget for it. But we haven't changed anything major. We changed our roller there last year to a 12-meter roller. Now it's not a new roller, and you say it was a bit of an overkill for the size of area we're covering, but it does make a huge difference. On all our plots are 12 meters long, and so this roller will roll them from end, and you were not double tracking the plots, which was particularly if you had a damp autumn, rolling across plots made a bit of a mess. So it was a good second-hand machine at 12-meter, and it's not structurally as heavy as some of the rollers, but it actually does perfectly fine on our lighter soils here. So it's not really a big. So that was a nice little addition to get it. Just I found it online, obviously, as a second-hand, so it was worth getting.
So it was almost an addition to the trials program rather than a necessity for farm.
Yeah. So we have, and then we have for sowing our cover crops, we worked with that disc and seeder on top of it. So that actually made not a big chore to get the cover crops in fairly efficiently, a 4-meter disc. So it got that done quick enough, and at the right setup.
Last question, I suppose a lot of farmers will be thinking about this as well, seeing as the weather isn't great and there's very little else they can do. So they're probably maybe turning back towards the workshop. A lot of machines here, Brendan, a lot of maintenance to be done. Do you have a prescribed way of getting through all the machines so that they're ready for when you need them next?
Yeah, well, the combines is the main one, and it kind of falls a little bit in that when you're just finished harvest, you were straight into doing some other work on, particularly when you have beans and that you're actually harvesting this in one field maybe and sowing in another field. But the combines now, but we did have all last week and the week before cleaning down, because we've one main combine, we've 4 plot combines, so all of those are quarter the size of the big combine, but they're equally as expensive. And it's not necessarily the expense of them, but it's just that they have been cleaned down properly and are put away working, and parts noted, what's worn, what needs to be done, and really very conscious of vermin, that they're all in the one tidy, clean shed with a concrete floor, concrete walls, but you still will get mice and rats in there. So that's the main thing, to have them cleaned down, and to open all the elevators, drums, stone traps, take everything, as much stuff as you can off, to leave it. We even take out the grain pans and take them out as best we can and leave them beside the combine. It's a bit of a lot of people wouldn't go to that, but it definitely makes that there's no resting area for mice. And then we're putting in a rodent shield around it, which is now we haven't used, it's just putting it in actually this week. It's just electric fence system around it. I've seen working in other places, so it seems to, hopefully it'll do the job, because we've expensive equipment on the combines, apart from just the hygiene of them, but just we don't want mice to be in there chewing away for the winter. But
so this is like a ring of steel, is it, to a degree, on the ground?
It's we'll call it a polyboard with steel strips through it, or bands through it, and they're all connected to an electric fencing unit. And they'll interlock, so if Mr. Mouse comes up and has a look at it or goes to try and climb it, he gets a a shock. He turns around and goes back. It doesn't kill him. He
Right.
turns around and goes the opposite direction. So
Right. Very
I'm
good.
sure a lot of people would like him to be dead beside it, but it appears to put them off. So they'd have to climb over that, and which they won't happen. But you'd have to be managed the way you put it into the shed. You can't have any parts of the combine that can be mice can't come across.
Touching or jumping or that kind of thing.
Yeah. So they have to come across it. So and then staff would want to be people who want to be aware that you don't go lifting this thing out either. But we will probably run the combines a couple of times during the winter and make sure they're all winter ready with your antifreeze and whatever. But that would be our main concern now. And then all our cultivation equipment, we'll go through them all, our power harrows, and make sure they're ready to go. Even though it's a bit, sometimes your tines or maybe it's a quarter warden, or there's another 100 acres in them, but you kind of have to bite the bullet and maybe just replace scrapers on power harrows or discs and machines. Just replace them now rather than trying to do it when you're ready to go next March, and it's all happens to one day. So that sort of stuff, getting your plough cleaned up and ready as well.
Brilliant. Listen, Brendan, thanks very much for your time. It's great getting an insight into kind of what happens there, and look, we'll be chatting to you maybe early next year to see how the farm is getting on as well.
Thanks, Michael.
So that's it today, and my thanks to Brendan for joining me on the podcast. So if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.